Hi. In today's video, a sister shared her experience of how in an attempt to commit abortion, she was taken to a realm where she was shown and told shocking truth about aborted babies and what becomes of their parent. Stay to the end to understand her experience. I grew up in a world that was both simple and complicated. My family was traditional and full of expectations about what a young girl should become. From a young age, I was taught the importance of modesty, purity, and obedience. My mother would often pull me close, whispering that my worth was deeply tied to how I held myself and the values I upheld. She would say, "You are a light, Gloria. Don't let anything dim it." I didn't understand then, but her words were like seeds planted in my heart. They were warnings, small reminders that I would later remember when it was too late. Life was small and my world felt safe. My days were spent in church, school, and home. I saw the world with innocent eyes, with a heart that hadn't yet learned about the shadows that lurked behind people's words and actions. As I entered my teenage years, everything began to shift. Suddenly, the friends I'd always played with were more interested in things I didn't understand, things that seemed so distant from the values I was raised with. They whispered about relationships, about the thrill of rebellion, and the allure of being wanted. The pressure to fit in became relentless. I watched as they paired off, went on dates, and laughed about their experiences. It felt like everyone was rushing toward something, leaving me behind. I felt trapped between the world I knew and the one everyone else seemed to be running toward. When my friend Stella, who was like a sister to me, started questioning why I wasn't dating, it was as if her words were little daggers, each one making me feel like something was wrong with me. The truth was, I didn't want to feel left out anymore. I didn't want to be seen as the strange girl who clung to childish values. The decision I made to have a boyfriend wasn't because I was ready or even because I wanted one, but because I wanted to be accepted. Stella was my guide, the one I looked up to in those days, though now I wonder if I was just too blind to see the danger in her words. I remember the day clearly, how she convinced me that just once wouldn't hurt. She handed me the pills with a casual smile, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "Look," she told me, "you're finally doing what everyone else is doing." The words rang in my ears as I swallowed them, feeling a sense of dread that I tried to ignore. After that first time, I felt different, like a part of me had vanished, leaving behind only emptiness. My mother's words came flooding back to me, haunting me, "Don't let anything dim your light." But that light felt like it was gone. I tried to play it off, to tell myself that maybe it was supposed to feel this way, that this was what growing up was. Television shows and my friends all seemed to share the same message: being in control meant enjoying life, exploring, taking chances. Every advertisement, every magazine, every story seemed to encourage this freedom, this idea that life was about pleasure without consequence. It felt like society was screaming at me to forget everything I had ever known, to believe that the values my mother taught me were outdated relics meant to hold me back. But the emptiness inside me didn't fade, it only grew. My friends and I laughed and acted like everything was fine, but deep down, I was struggling, weighed down by guilt and confusion. I felt lost, but I was too proud to admit it, too scared to go back to what I had known. I still remember the day I finally gave in. It was supposed to be special, wasn't it? Something meaningful, something that would make me feel closer to another person. But all I felt afterward was a strange hollowness. I had gone through with it because my friends pushed, because they said it was time, that it was the only way to feel grown up. I didn't want them to look down on me, to laugh and whisper about my innocence anymore. They made it sound like I was the last one left in our group who hadn't crossed that line, like I was strange for waiting. Stella's voice echoed in my mind, her assurance that everything would be fine, that everyone was doing it and I would be safe. She even gave me pills and a condom, as if these would guard me from every possible consequence. But afterward, I felt like I had been emptied out. There was no magic, no new sense of maturity. There was only a cold darkness, something I couldn't shake off. I kept trying to tell myself I'd done the right thing, that now I was just like everyone else. But the guilt lingered, growing heavier each day. Looking back, it feels as if something broke inside me that day. My mother had always told me that a girl who keeps her purity has a certain light within her, a light that the world can't steal. She warned me that losing that would feel like losing a piece of myself, something that couldn't be regained. And she was right. There was a part of me, something pure and precious, that I could never get back. I tried to shake it off, to laugh along with my friends as if nothing was wrong. But the sadness, the regret, it was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. I became bitter and my anger grew, though I didn't know why. I was angry at my friends, at Stella, and mostly at myself. Every time I looked at my mother, I felt ashamed, unable to meet her eyes, fearing she would somehow see what I had done. When I first realized I was pregnant, a wave of dread crashed over me. I was only 16, still so young, and this wasn't how life was supposed to go. My heart raced with fear and shame as the reality sank in. I was barely able to look at myself in the mirror, let alone face my family. I could already imagine the disappointment in my mother's eyes, the whispers, the endless questions that I wouldn't be able to answer. A child. I was carrying a child, and yet I was still just a child myself. In those first days, my feelings toward the life inside me were so conflicted. A small part of me felt a strange tenderness, a faint warmth when I thought of the baby, but it was drowned out by fear. I kept asking myself how this happened. What would I do? How could I raise a baby when I could barely navigate my own life? Every future I'd pictured for myself felt shattered, replaced by a blurry image of isolation and shame. I felt alone, afraid, and ashamed. Then, there was Stella, who tried to comfort me by saying, "It's no big deal." She reminded me how she'd gone through this herself, how she managed to move on with her life as if nothing happened. Stella talked about it so casually, as if I would just bounce back and pretend nothing had happened. And as much as I felt that small connection to the life within me, I felt myself listening to her words, being pulled toward the easy way out. Part of me knew deep down that something wasn't right, but I clung to her assurances. I wanted to believe that this wasn't a real choice, that it was just a mistake I could erase with no consequences. The day of the procedure felt like an out-of-body experience. Everything seemed to move in slow motion as I walked into that cold, sterile clinic. I remember lying there, the fear and shame washing over me like tidal waves. And then, as the procedure began, I was suddenly out of my body. I saw myself floating. In the midst of my despair, while floating, something inexplicable happened, something that forced me to face the true weight of my choices. I was suddenly drift to a place, and in this place I was given a vision of the book of life. In it, I saw everything clearly, the choices I had made and the consequences they bore, laid bare before me. I felt exposed, each action and decision written plainly, especially the ones I had so desperately tried to forget. There, within those pages, was the life I had ended. I saw the innocence of that soul, and the immense value it held, woven into my own life in ways I had not understood. Then, I was shown the moment of conception, a sacred, beautiful flash of light, the instant life begins. I saw how the soul, fully formed, springs forth in that tiny, miraculous union of two cells. It isn't a gradual process, I realized, it's instantaneous. In a moment, there is a life, a soul filled with divine purpose, emanating a light that shines with the love of its creator. This light comes from God Himself, linking each new soul to Him in an unbreakable bond. Seeing this, I understood that each child is not just a physical being but a bearer of this divine spark, made in God's image, full of unique potential and love. And then, I heard a cry, not of anger or accusation, but of sorrow. A lament not just for the loss of life, but for the pain and suffering it would bring to me, to those around me, and to the heart of God. Heaven mourned this soul, and I realized that this cry wasn't just from the child, but from all the children whose lives had been taken too soon. The sorrow was immense, filling every corner of my being with regret and remorse. In that vision, I saw the womb as it was intended to be, a sanctuary, a sacred space created by God to hold and protect life. It was designed not only to nurture physical growth, but to provide a place where the soul could connect with God, shielded from the harshness of the world. My womb was meant to be a sanctuary, a place of warmth and safety for the innocent life within me. I understood now that by rejecting this role, I had allowed darkness to take hold where light was meant to be. I realized that abortion left a lasting impact on a woman's soul, an emptiness that no amount of reassurance or justification could fill. It felt as though a part of my own soul had been removed with that child, leaving a wound that couldn't heal. In that vision, I was shown how abortion is not only a personal loss but a spiritual act that reverberates far beyond the mother and child. I saw that the devil uses abortion to gain power, exploiting the moment life is rejected, the instant innocence is silenced. Each act of taking an innocent life serves as a kind of dark offering, an act that strengthens his influence in the world. It was clear that every time we stray from God's will, especially when life itself is ended, the devil's grip on humanity tightens. I came to understand that abortion, to him, is more than just the ending of life, it's an opportunity. It's a foothold, a way for him to assert his influence over hearts and minds, creating despair and separation from God. This is why the pain felt by women who go through this is so intense. He wants us to feel trapped and powerless, isolated from God's forgiveness. The vision continued to reveal how each unborn soul, created in the image of God, is precious to heaven. When these lives are taken, it creates a spiritual disturbance. In that moment, I saw demons rejoicing, celebrating the sacrifice of innocent blood as if it were a victory. I could see them gathering, as if each aborted soul added strength to their presence in the world. It was horrifying to witness how this practice seemed to empower darkness, giving fuel to those forces that seek to harm us. The demons were endless, almost jubilant, at each act that separated another soul from this world. And with each one, they gained more power, as if each innocent life taken gave them a stronger foothold to continue spreading sorrow, chaos, and despair in the world. I realized that the devil doesn't just target individuals, he works to shift society itself, influencing its values so that the taking of innocent life seems less significant. One of the most heartbreaking revelations was how deeply society has come to accept practices that stray from God's path, often in the name of freedom, convenience, or choice. In the vision, I saw how people around me, including myself, had been influenced by messages that dulled our sensitivity to sin. We believed that taking control of our lives meant ignoring the sanctity of life, embracing values that celebrated independence over compassion and responsibility. I saw how society has gradually come to deny the gravity of abortion, often framing it as a necessity rather than recognizing it as the ending of a life. It was clear that this denial was another victory for the devil. By normalizing what is against God's law, we lose our connection to His truth, slipping into a state of spiritual numbness. And so, sin becomes a part of life, accepted as if it were inconsequential. In that vision, it was as though I was looking at my life and the world around me with new eyes. What had seemed normal before now appeared as a trap, a way to distract us from God's calling and keep us separated from His love. The devil uses this denial, this normalization of sin, to lead us away from God without us even noticing. I could see how this blindness allowed evil to grow unchecked, feeding on the innocent lives lost, and leaving us more vulnerable to despair and darkness. I was shown that even the methods we believe to be safe and controlled, the ones we're told prevent life, can sometimes end it. The intrauterine device I had used for years was not merely a barrier. I came to see it as an instrument that denied life a chance to begin. I learned that each time a fertilized egg could not implant due to this device, it was still a soul, a spark of life that had been created and yet was never given the chance to grow. What we called prevention was actually much closer to ending life, though we might never even know when it happened. These microabortions, as I now understood them to be, were not just physical processes but also had spiritual weight. Every potential life, every soul that had been formed in that moment of conception had been denied its purpose. And I could feel the gravity of each one, the countless lives never realized, sparks of divinity that were extinguished before they could flourish. It was heart-wrenching to realize the cumulative impact of these choices I had made, thinking they were harmless. In the vision, I saw the souls that had been lost because of these choices. Each one was beautiful, a fully formed essence created by God, and they shone with light like tiny stars. I could feel the tragedy of their unfulfilled lives. They had been intended to enter this world, to bring joy, goodness, and their own unique purpose. Yet each one had been stopped before it even began, as if a door to life had been closed on them. In that moment, I realized that what we see as tiny or insignificant can be deeply significant in God's eyes. Even a single soul, unformed in our view, was as valuable to Him as any other. I felt the weight of each lost opportunity for life, not just for the individual soul but for the world as a whole. Each life has its ripple effect, its own purpose, and without it, something vital is missing. I didn't understand the impact of my actions at the time, but now I could see how each choice I had made opened doors I never intended. Each denial of life, each step away from God's grace, weakened the spiritual defenses around me, allowing darkness to seep into my life. It was a slow infiltration, but one that had come to control and consume me. Every sin, every moment of anger or bitterness, was like an invitation for darker forces to take hold. The chains of guilt and shame were wrapped around me, binding me to a darkness that fed on my despair. And each day, I felt as though I was slipping further away from who I was meant to be, more vulnerable to the powers I had unknowingly invited in. The doors I had opened were no longer just metaphors, they were real, and the darkness that entered was relentless. In my desperation, I turned to confession, barely grasping its full importance. But in that confessional, something profound happened. It was as though those chains that had wrapped themselves around me began to loosen. The sacrament of confession wasn't just a ritual, it was a breaking of those bonds, a release from the darkness that had ensnared me. Every word, every admission of my failures and regrets, was a step toward freedom. I learned that confession had the power to break Satan's hold on my soul. This sacrament wasn't just about speaking my sins aloud, it was about surrendering them to God, allowing His grace to cleanse me. In confession, I could feel the weight lifting, feel the shadows receding, replaced by a light I hadn't felt in so long. Gloria's story is not just hers alone, it is a reflection of the power of God's forgiveness and the hope that Christ offers to all who seek it. Through her journey, we are reminded that no matter how far we have fallen, there is always a way back to God. His mercy is boundless, His love is unconditional, and His forgiveness is freely given. We are called to embrace that forgiveness, to accept the hope that comes with it, and to let it transform our lives. Just as Gloria found peace and purpose, so too can we, when we surrender our burdens and trust in God's plan for our lives. Thank you for staying to the end of this experience. Save a soul by sharing this video with your friends and families, so that they will be saved from the path of hell. Subscribe to our channel if you have not, to remain updated whenever we share another experience that is being sent to us. Thank you.